Our president often says and does things that I simply can't defend. I'm not generally referring to his policies, but to some of his personal insults he directs at certain individuals and his insistence on putting his name on things which already have names. However, in this video, I shall explain why Donald Trump is still very much my president. Donald Trump has a history of insulting people he doesn't like and with those who criticize him or his policies. So as you can see, this is not a new phenomenon. It has been one of his trademarks since the very beginning of his foray into the world of politics. In fact, it has been argued that his insults and other strident and often ad-libbed oratory contributed to his victory in 2016 because he was unlike any politician anyone had ever seen before. Now, whether or not it contributed to the success of his campaign, there can be no doubt that no one on the planet had ever seen anything quite like Donald Trump. And, as I have pointed out in previous videos, Trump does like to put his name on stuff. But even I couldn't see the point in modifying the name of the Kennedy Center to the Donald J. Trump Kennedy Center. But in spite of what his critics may say, our president is not a stupid man. Somewhat vain, sometimes obnoxious, okay, but not stupid. I don't believe for a second that he didn't see how this would provoke outrage among his critics. I mean, let's be honest. It doesn't take much to send the Democrats and their spiritual brethren in the press into episodes of dizzying hissy-fittery. I don't even have a problem with some who describe him as unpresidential. I'll concede that he certainly doesn't talk like any president from my lifetime. I hate to admit it, but the politician that in many ways most reminds me of Trump out of those I have heard extensively is Hugo Chavez, the late president/dictator of Venezuela. So you well may ask, how can I still give my full-throated endorsement to this person, this vulgar, unworthy wannabe dictator whose personal ambitions seem to have no limit? Honestly, it's not that hard to explain. To begin with, we have the Democratic Party and especially the quality of their last two presidential candidates. The party, on its own, decided that Joe Biden was no longer able to continue in his role as president. Actually, I don't think they really cared about that. Jake Tapper even wrote a book about how everybody in the party and the press had known for some time that he was mentally compromised. The only problem they really had with the former president was that he couldn't beat Donald Trump, not that he was incapable of carrying out the duties of leading the most powerful country in the world. This cavalier attitude about who wields the power of the presidency and their willingness to compromise the security of the nation in order to maintain control of the government is only part of what is wrong with today's Democratic Party. Then we have Kamala Harris. Let me back up a bit. Do you remember Taco Trump? You know, T-A-C-O Trump. Trump always chickens out. Well, I think that moniker fairly died after he bombed the Iranian nuclear facilities in June, among other things. Now, fast reverse to Kamala during her presidential run in 2024. A few days before the election, a reporter asked her how she had voted on Prop 36 in California. For those who don't remember, Proposition 36 was a referendum that would overturn the law that made shoplifting for values of $950 or less a misdemeanor, and which led to a stunning epidemic of retail theft. I think most Americans were shocked to see the impunity with which people and sometimes organized groups would walk into a retailer and walk out with hundreds, even thousands of dollars of goods without ever being challenged and knowing full well that there would be absolutely no consequence for their crime. Anyway, here is the former vice president answering the question.
Did you vote on Prop 36?
So my ballot is on its way to California, and I'm going to trust the system that it will arrive there. And I am not going to talk about the vote on that because, honestly, it's the Sunday before the election, and I don't intend to create an endorsement one way or another around it. So
bold and decisive. Seriously. Yes, it would be wrong to answer that. She wouldn't want to sway the election by giving her opinion. She was the proverbial deer in the headlights. No one had told her the answer, and she couldn't risk alienating the sane people who know that stealing is a crime, but heaven forbid she offend the wokesters who consider arresting people to be racist. Oh, what to do? What did the polls in Pennsylvania and Michigan say? But the corrupt and inept Democratic Party is the small part of why I support our president. I also happen to support his policies, at least as far as I understand them. Let me explain. When I say at least as far as I understand them, I am mostly referring to domestic and economic issues. I have heard the arguments for and against tariff policy, and that is something I am unable to evaluate from a well-qualified point of view. It seems like it should cause inflation, but it brings in revenue and the effects aren't exactly clear, etc., etc. But honestly, the science of economics is one of those disciplines that elevates your local weatherman to Nostradamus-level status. Economists pretty much always get it wrong. So in that sense, I have to give Trump a pass and we'll see how it works out. And on inflation and the high cost of living, well, it is complicated. These problems did not originate with Trump, but they are indeed his to deal with now. Lower interest rates and lower fuel costs will help somewhat, but medical and other insurance problems are more daunting. Obamacare, also known as the Affordable Care Act, is a disaster caused by the Democrats. Like anything the government decides to pay for or subsidize, the cost never goes down. But the problem still has to be dealt with, and I haven't seen a great solution so far. You can blame whoever it was that took a dump on the floor, but it still has to be cleaned up. Of course, one of the 800-pound gorillas is the policy of immigration, and especially of the mass deportation of people who cross the border illegally. I can't possibly say everything I need to say here. It will require a separate presentation. For now, I will say that both the Republicans and the Democrats in Congress and elsewhere are absolutely to blame for this situation that goes back since forever. Of course, in my opinion, some of what is happening now is grossly unfair to people who have lived and worked in the United States for decades. But the last administration's mind-bending policy of allowing hundreds of thousands of people to cross the southern border every month brought us to the point where extreme measures had to be taken. Like I say, look here for a forthcoming presentation on the subject. Briefly, on other domestic issues, I believe that having National Guard troops on the streets of our major cities would be of use to the local police, who can use all the help they can get. It helped in Washington, D.C., and we'll see about Memphis and New Orleans. There are legal restrictions to be worked out for sure, but the argument that it can't be allowed because Trump is going to take over ballot boxes and prevent fair elections is laughable. The resistance to cleaning up crime is pure politics. Here, I agree with the president. And while I'm at it, I've always been a small government advocate. So as far as reducing the federal workforce, I'm all in, Mr. Trump. Now, about those entitlement programs. On the international front, there is little that I disagree with. When you think about the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, and Latin America, I think critics should ask themselves, WWKD, what would Kamala do? Would she have sent bombers to take out Iranian nuclear sites? Could she have negotiated a deal to get the Israeli and American hostages out of Gaza? And would Putin even take her phone calls? Fashionably chubby chance on all three. And what about Venezuela? People all over Venezuela were literally praying for Donald Trump's help because he was truly their last hope to rid themselves of Nicolas Maduro and the Chavista regime. Some people are still saying that you can support removing Maduro from power and not support Donald Trump for doing so. This makes absolutely no sense. I mean, think about it. Maduro lost his last election by 40 points and still wouldn't leave. After multiple stolen elections over many years, Venezuelans came to believe that it would require some kind of violent event to oust Nicolas Maduro from power, be it from a coup by the Venezuelan military or with outside help. Now tell me, who besides Trump would have done those things necessary to remove the Venezuelan dictator from power by setting up a naval blockade and by sending the Delta Force to physically remove Maduro? Soon, I shall dedicate an entire video to the situation in Venezuela and Latin America. Look for it. In that video, I shall also explain why I support the president's efforts in Argentina, as well as Chile, Ecuador, and Central America. So, why did Trump have to rename the Kennedy Center? There's only one idea that occurs to me that makes any sense at all. It occurred to me the other night. Clearly, the whole thing was going to cause an explosion of outrage on the left, and even with some on the right. It would surely dominate the news cycle for at least a week. Maybe that was the point. Perhaps it was meant to divert the attention of our pathetic press so that investigators could look into things like voter fraud or official malfeasance by deep state officials. Maybe it was a tactic designed to diffuse the attention of prying eyes while we developed diplomatic relations with the ETs, or to finally solve the mystery of why we need a fifth season of Stranger Things. Or it could be exactly what it looks like. At any rate, 100 years from now, historians will judge Donald Trump on his achievements more than on his numerous peccadillos and eccentricities. There will definitely be plenty of details about the 45th and 47th president to keep scholars and students amused for as long as history remembers the United States. And while some of these things will cause brows to furrow and eyes to roll, I still believe that Donald Trump shall go down as a vitally transformative and historically fascinating world leader. And he will also be remembered as the absolutely funniest president ever. This is Pablo El Molinero.